Okay, and we're live. So, welcome to another episode of Cyber Bytes, the podcast. Today, it's my pleasure to be joined by Mohit Garg, who is the CEO and co-founder at OLOID. It's a pleasure to have you on, Mohit. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you inviting me, and I look forward to speaking with you today.
You're welcome. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this chat. We've got a lot to discuss. For the audience, just to kick off, for the audience that don't know who you are or don't mu know much about OLOID, can you give a quick intro to you and the business, and we'll dive in from there.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Mohit Garg. I'm the co-founder and CEO of OLOID, based in Sunnyvale, California. Uh, my background is mostly startup world, right from grad school. I've been in startup world, was an early engineer at Aruba Networks, saw the company build the product, ship, go IPO, had a great experience working with another startup founded by Stanford professor, which was acquired by Intel. So I got very motivated to build a company of my own and got the startup bug, as they say. So 2011 founded a SaaS company in sales enablement space called Mindtickle, and I had revenue responsibilities. I led the entire GTM building for the company, brought it in a pretty good double-digit ARR, very good funding, and I felt like the company was ready for seasoned management to take over. So 2019, I took an advisor role in Mindtickle and co-founded OLOID.
Right.
OLOID, it stands for Online Linked Offline Identity, and maybe I'll talk more about the name later. But we are very passionate about secure and frictionless identity and access management for deskless workers. So that's the cybersecurity play we are in. And yeah, we're just excited to be building the company. A lot of growth ahead of us. Series A,
Mm.
working with marquee investors and marquee customers. So it's been a great, rewarding journey.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm excited to share more on what we're building.
Yeah, definitely exciting times given the situation for you guys, and we'll cover that slightly later in the podcast. Where I'm keen to begin, and normally we dive back into your background. I guess the first question is, so you were an early engineer, as you mentioned at HPE. Um, you then started a startup in sales enablement and then gone back to cyber. What's the dynamic and story there?
Yeah, you make a good point there, Stefan, and often I get this question a lot. And I think what we find is there are domain expert founders and there are founders who love building, and they could be building anything. So I would like to think I fall in the latter category personally. Like my motivation is, am I going to have fun building this? I'm excited about the space. Whether I'm extremely knowledgeable, I think comes as a second thought to me. Sometimes it requires more work than when you start, you realize, oh my God, what did I sign up for? Sometimes ignorance is bliss. But yeah, I think my journey has been about lots of path dependency, who I met, who I spoke with. In this case, my co-founder, CTO, Madhu, who come from identity management space. I basically got excited about his vision, right? And in case of Mindtickle, which was sales enablement, we were four co-founders who were very passionate about gamification and gaming. An application of these principles to sales enablement became a use case for that very strong capability, which we brought as founders and technology to the mix. So I think you could almost say it was hammer looking for a nail, and we found a pretty good nail in sales enablement. And then we became students of sales enablement, right? We just committed ourselves to understanding the psyche of salespeople, what drives success in sales, and then we built a platform to accomplish that. So, yeah, I would say if there's one common thread, it's the desire to build something meaningful, impactful,
Mm.
fun, and the actual industry or application or use case, it's the process of constant learning. Founders have to be lifelong learners, and I'm personally not wedded to one space or the other.
Yeah, and touching on a point there because you weren't experts in sales enablement, right? But you just love building, as you described. This could be a good learning to share with other folks that maybe an example is they're in a different industry than cyber, but they want to break into cyber. What sort of learnings or piece of advice would you give that person that's looking to break in or they've broken in? What would you do then? It sounds like you're obsessed with learning the psychology and learning the domain.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it, Stefan, that you become a student of that space and commit to really deep understanding of the buyers, users, day in their life, their needs. Additionally, one point I can't emphasize enough is to surround yourself with people who fill those gaps for you. So, like I mentioned, in my case, it was a CTO co-founder and then a head of engineering who have significant experience in the space, right?
Mm,
My co-founder and head of engineering was my classmate at Stanford. He's been in network security for decades, right? So I think it's about finding complementarity and a shared interest and vision.
mm,
If you can get excited about a vision and become the best salesperson of that vision, the first thing you're selling to is your co-founders, right? Then you're getting them excited and as passionate, and then becomes a joint pursuit. And now what you're figuring out is, okay, which are the gaps for us to make the best team to go after this problem? And sometimes it's also finding founding engineers. It's about founding team members, not just co-founders, right? So I think it's a combination of committing to that learning process, but also not taking on exclusively your role individually to be an expert at everything. It's about finding complementarity in the team that you build around the company.
yeah, I love it. And out of interest, do you think you could be a solo founder, or is it, or do you
Yeah.
think that you just work best with someone else and sharing that?
Yeah, so I think sharing has never been something which I've had a problem with, right? So I think by nature, I love to work with teams and work with people. But I could see a day where I get passionate about something which I'm the only one passionate about, right? There could be something where there's not a whole lot of money in it to be made. There's something which is based on my own personal experience, right?
Mm,
So I could see myself being a solo founder because I'm so passionate about solving something. I would rather
yeah,
do it myself than wait for people to come along.
yeah,
So I think it's about your need and desire to get started and get started now. And
love it.
sometimes that is so strong
Mm,
that you just want to get going, right? If
yeah,
people come with you, great. Otherwise, you start building, and as you build, you convert naysayers into believers. That's how it works.
yeah. And let's talk Oloid then. So there's a slight story behind the name. Let's begin there. Can you explain that to the audience?
Yeah. So, first of all, I mentioned that we're in the identity management space, right? So as we start thinking about the name of the company, right, we wanted to have some notion of identity reflect in the name. So OLOID is an acronym, online linked offline identity. And the concept is online experiences of identity and access management when you're in a company provided laptop, when you're on your company provided or MDM managed phone or device. That's where your online and your cyber environment is responding to your identity and authentication needs. But if you pivot to the other side, which is deskless workers, we also call them frontline workers, right? They don't have a dedicated company provided laptop or computer. Most of the times, they're not on a company provided phone, that they're working on their personal phones. Sometimes they're not even permitted to bring their smartphones into the factories or warehouses or high IP confidentiality areas, right? Pharma labs and whatnot. So now that whole notion of cybersecurity, when you are controlling everything from the device to the connection to the MDM and the VPN goes away. And in that environment, identity and access management is a massive challenge. You're almost offline from your traditional standpoint. So that's why we want to bridge the online world with the offline world of identity and access. And that's why we came up with the OLOID acronym and the name. But what we got very excited about is that OLOID is something which my co-founders and I knew of from school as a very interesting shape. It's used in hydraulics. It's got very interesting mathematical properties. In fact, it's on our website, on our About Us page. We have a small video there. It shows how that shape looks weird and crooked, but it actually rolls in a perfectly straight line.
Mhm.
So just found that to be a very exciting potential logo for the company. We could do branding around it. We could have fun with the name, while it could be meaningful for our buyers and audience, and also would be good for SEO because you don't want to be a very generic name where people find it hard to discover you on the web.
Yeah, very cool. I like the story behind it. And what you've kind of touched on this, but to dive a bit deeper. So what led to the founding? How did that all come about?
Yeah. So when Madhu and I got together, Madhu is my co-founder, CTO. He had a very strong thesis about physical spaces. He said, "Hey, when I am trying to access companies' resources, right? It could be a door, a turnstile, a tablet, a handheld device. Now these spaces have to intuitively respond to my identity and give me the access that I should receive, right? So if I'm entering a door, the door should be aware of who I am and either give me access. If I'm a contractor, I may not have access to the data center. It should not give me access, right? Similarly, if I'm trying to log in into a shared computer or a kiosk, I may be a supervisor, I may be a new employee. My access needs to be granted based on my identity and authentication, right? So this whole notion of identity aware access in offline environments,
Mm,
we started pitching this to potential design partners. And we started to hear problems around physical access, physical security. We started to hear problem statements around digital access, which is access to Workday, access to kiosks where the employees are accessing inventory, applying for leave, taking training. And recently, we've been hearing about OT access. So we heard about even time clocks, right? The fact that employees have to clock in and clock out and they have to establish their identity. What we heard is today this is being solved in a very siloed, disaggregated manner. You could have a time clock with device resident biometrics. So an employee comes in, they go and onboard the fingerprint on a Kronos clock. The same employee is using a badge to enter a data center or entering an inventory room. The same person could be using uh, some kind of PIN to get access to a tablet in a warehouse and a password, a 10-character password on a Windows PC Active Directory. Now, I've already talked about the same individual having four forms of identity, four different systems. It's a CISO's nightmare to manage identity data. So once we started framing it like this, we said we are not only solving access authentication workflows, we are truly building an identity platform here. And that could be very valuable. It could be very impactful. Like it's almost like building an Okta all over again, but instead of SaaS applications coming together, you're serving all these deskless worker applications. So that's the vision we've carried along right from our seed Series A pitch deck. It's always been about building the single sign-on for physical identity. And I think we just have enjoyed getting our customers uh, getting excited about this vision, resonating with the problems. And I think that just led one thing to the other. It broadened our product portfolio, and we now are much closer to a platform story than a use case story about solving just one single problem for a customer.
mm. Yeah, I love it. And so I can imagine a lot of biometrics and facial recognition, for example, goes into this. So it sounds like there would be potentially a lot of privacy concerns. How are you guys tackling that?
Yeah. So there are a few things which I think are non-obvious. One is privacy is not only a data issue, it's a huge education issue. Including myself, until I became a student of the space, my instinct would have been to take my consumer identity, my identity as an individual, and apply the same principles at work,
Right.
right? The reality is, identity management in a work context is very different than my own personal identity. Workplace identity is a managed identity, which means the management has to be done in a compliant manner, in a regulated manner, and also in a manner which preserves my rights as an individual, but also the company's right from a data standpoint. Now, if we apply this lens, what that means is the status quo is a lot worse than after you implement OLOID. Because if a company is not using a platform like OLOID, they are asking a deskless worker to take their biometrics and fingerprint and use that on a time clock. Now, what happens if somebody steals that hardware time clock? They lost all their biometrics, right? They are using shared username passwords and giving it to 50 employees on the same kiosk. What happens if there's a compliance violation? Somebody accessed some, uploaded some data, company's proprietary data. Now, you have no accountability, right? So I think if you start marrying the data management layer from a company's cyber policies and cybersecurity standpoint, you start following the right principles of consent management, local biometric regulations around CCP in California, BIPA in Illinois, and you combine it with a centralized identity management, which says as soon as the employee leaves the organization, is terminated, this data is dealt with in regulation with the compliance. Now you're talking about a very controlled environment. You're talking about a very manageable problem. The challenge is privacy outside of workplace is highly unmanageable. Your clickstream, your cookies, and how data is being captured, uh, there is little or no control. There's no CISO sitting as a central leader driving the policies and governance around your data, right? It's up to 2,000 vendors who are touching your identity every day, online and otherwise. And each of them have different objectives, different types of ownership structures. So I think we run the risk of taking this highly complicated identity, privacy, governance challenges in our consumer identity and personal space, and we bring the mindset to the workplace. The problem with that is we hold back progress. We hold back frictionless experience. So today, I digress, but I think in cybersecurity podcast, this is going to be very useful, is we make constant trade-offs between usability and security. We say that I will use biometric scans and iris and whatnot for my highest security data center. And I'll make it very hard to use and I'll make it hard to onboard. The special hardware required for onboarding that user because it's secure, so I don't have to make it usable. Or on the other side, I'll use shared username passwords because I can live with low security, but I don't want friction, right? If you take the construct of having a strong data management, strong privacy compliance, regulatory compliance from a biometric standpoint, you can actually build something which is both secure and useful. You just have to commit to adopting modern technology, right? So facial recognition, palm recognition, many of these technologies are now very, very robust. They should not be discarded for simple, less informed fears that mostly emanate from our privacy concern in individual life. There's a massive, massive opportunity of bringing modern technology like face biometrics to the workplace and getting that efficient frontier of usability and security.
Yeah, it's interesting. And naturally, I haven't really thought about that. And I like what you said about student in the space, but I would take that approach, right? What I do personally, I'd naturally just bring that and take that to work. And that's a big issue, as you described. So that's really interesting. And I want to touch on the founding journey piece in terms of series funding. So am I right in saying the first seed round was that early days of COVID? Did that happen?
Yeah, and there's a pivot story there because the first use case that OLOID wanted to address was with physical access.
Right.
And we wanted to make exactly the use case I mentioned Madhu dreamt of. You approach a door and door identifies you, and in an office space, you no longer have to carry badges, your mobile device and your face authentication will give you access frictionlessly,
Yeah.
right? Now, the challenge is offices were not open. There was no timeline for employees to come back to the office,
Mm,
right? So we had to pivot hard
mm,
to which workplaces are open, and factories were open. Essential industries were still operating. In fact, they had
right.
massive demand and not enough supply, so they were hiring. So we, through this process, started looking very closely to the needs of deskless workers and these frontline workers. And we took exactly the same principles, but with different authentication factors, right? So deskless workers, frontline workers, most likely are not going to use a Bluetooth device, smartphone, for accessing kiosks, computers, and shared devices. Unions will start saying, okay, you're making the employee use my phone. Now pay for the phone, pay for the data connection. And you're talking about 50, 100,000 employees, right? We're talking about $10s million of telecom spend.
Mm,
So that's where we identified that biometrics would be a great fit for this use case. So the problem statement has remained unchanged, right? Single sign-on for physical identity. It can manifest in a Class A building, it can manifest in a factory, in a warehouse, in a pharma lab. But we got hyper focused on the needs of these non-traditional environments from a cyber perspective, more of the healthcare, retail, hospitality, pharma verticals, because those were operating in COVID and offices were not. And our product built with those integrations and with those users in mind. So we got pretty strong. We built that muscle because of COVID. So our pitch has actually
yeah.
changed between seed and Series A as a result.
I was going to say, yeah, that massive shift that no one was expecting, just all
Yeah.
of a sudden everyone's at home. That's pretty crazy given your initial mission statement. And how have you seen that change then? So maybe you can give some specifics around the pitch. But now what we're seeing on the recruitment side is folks are going back to the office. Hybrid is becoming much more common. Even we know some of the bigger companies are introducing full-time back to the office. So how's that changing for you guys?
Yeah. Uh, Based on my personal experience, I believe in building company is in arcs. So you almost have one growth arc, one hockey stick, and then
Mhm.
you have to do TAM expansion and pick another hockey stick. So you have to constantly keep on uh, building on these arcs of TAM expansion. And I personally believe you shouldn't take two arcs at the same time. You should hyper focus on one specific type of user persona, buyer persona, and nail it
Mhm.
completely. So once we started working on frontline worker needs for identity and access and authentication, we have committed ourselves entirely for that user persona and buyer persona, right? We are completely letting go of the Class A building, modern tech, financial services, class building scenario. We'll come back to it later, either through an acquisition or product extensions. But there is such a big target addressable market for us, right? If you think about US workforce, approximately, if you think about 160 million workforce, it's half and half. In fact, there are more deskless workers who are not working in front of a dedicated desk every day. There are more employees, retail and manufacturing and hospitality, pharma, healthcare. So the TAM is so massive, we don't have to worry
Mhm.
about our first arc of hockey stick. So we're staying very focused on identity and access for frontline workers, and we're totally committed to winning in that space, becoming a de facto leader for that space. And yeah, I mean, once we are a very sizable company and we want to do TAM expansion, we clearly can address a much broader market. But this is very sizable market for us to build our first version of the company with.
Yeah, the market is huge, as you say, and staying on the funding theme. So Dell Technology Capital, they're one of your investors, right? How do they support you through the early stages and the pains that you go through as an early stage startup?
Yeah, Dell Technology Capital, they led our Series A. And I would also note that Okta and Honeywell co-invested with them. So Dell actually came in as more of a financial investor, and Honeywell and Okta came in as strategics.
Cool.
It's been a great experience working with that combination, right? You have this board experience, a highly experienced board member who has been a financially motivated board member, driving that discipline that an early stage company needs, everything from board meetings to hiring to now scaling and reporting, right? And then having strategics like Honeywell and Okta helping us everything from product integrations, product strategy, scaling our combined channel go-to-market. So I would say Dell has primarily been extremely valuable as a board member and driving discipline in the company. The deep experience of having seen companies like Druva being built, right? So we get a lot of experience from a board member who's
Mhm.
seen companies like Druva being built to 300, 400 million of ARR.
Yeah.
Dell's already engaged in multiple opportunities for us to use the Dell platform, right? Everything from their tablet division, getting access to that, getting access to the VMware folks where they have relationships, to the broader investor ecosystem. But end of the day, we look at Dell as a financially motivated investor, right? If we are working with Dell as a customer, that's a separate relationship, right? In case of Honeywell, Okta, and we're starting to work with many other partners, we're building go-to-markets along with them, right? They are broadly in the identity access security space, right? So we see this clear sort of roles for different parts of our cap table, where I think each investor is playing their own role very well, and we're
Mhm.
partnering with them in that spirit. And yeah, we're very grateful for having such a supportive board.
Yeah, awesome. And to wrap things up slowly here then, so keen to touch on the future looking. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening from what we discussed. Recent funding, you're growing as a business, the total addressable market, it's endless. What does the next, maybe starting short term, what does the next year or so look like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, we recently added a Series A1 financing with Yaletown Partners who came
Hmm.
in and led the round. Now, we are going to use this additional capital to double down on our go-to-market efforts, right? I think product's been built over the last 4 years where it is very compelling. It's got like we basically work with a Pareto efficiency, right? We got 80% of the integrations we need. The long tail
Hmm.
we can address later, right? We have
Right.
the 80% of capability from a content perspective, from a marketing perspective, right? We have enough to double down and build a go-to-market with, right? So we are primarily focusing on repeating the success we've had with customers like Flex, Tyson Foods, Honeywell. We've all got massive deployments, 100,000 plus employee deployments. It's about rinse and repeat. Can we take that same message which appealed to that CISO, that CIO, that cybersecurity IAM leader, and then it's resonating. So how do we get more and more of these large employers of hourly workforce to adopt our technology? Build a very strong customer advisory board behind the business, start working with analysts to resegment the workforce identity management space. So if you think about workforce identity management, it is a category in itself, and then you have consumer identity access and management, right? Our thesis is workforce identity management will now divide into desk worker or knowledge worker and non-knowledge worker, deskless worker identity and access management, right? So I think if over the next couple of years, we continue on our mission, sign up more of these large brands, collaborate with them, collaborate with the analyst community, take this education message. I think not only are we building a very valuable company, we're also doing a huge service to this end user who remains underserved. Like tech has not been built with this user persona in mind. So we remove the access challenges from a friction standpoint. We boost security of these OT operational environments, and we become a de facto leader in a new quadrant that we can create in the space. So I think those are huge milestones that we're going to be pursuing in the next couple of years.
Yeah, super exciting. for everyone involved. And I'm keen to follow you guys from the sidelines because it's going to be an interesting journey to follow. Well, Mahit, we're coming to time. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, and thank you for sharing more insight to OLOID, what you guys are doing, what you're building, and some of the stories in your earlier journey. Just before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience?
No, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Stefan. And yeah, no, I think for the audience, if there are points that we discussed today that you're interested in, intrigued with, connect with me on social media or write to me at mg@oloid.ai. I think it's about us collaborating with every stakeholder in the space, including our competitors, and building together to realize this future vision for the industry.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I look forward to collaborating with the broader community to make this a reality.
Yeah, very cool. And we'll include your contact information as well, so folks can get in contact. Well, Mahit, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like and share with your friends and colleagues, as this is really important for the show's reach. If you'd like to be our next guest or are interested in Aspiron Search's staffing solutions, please get in touch directly with me or reach out to us via our website www.aspironsearch.com.